Go.
On January 8, 1832, 2 hours north of New York City, in the small mill town of Walden, New York, Alfred Neafie was born. It being a frigid winter day, and Alfred being the fourth child of Cornelius and Rhoda Neafie, Alfred's birth, while a joyous occasion, was one of minimal fanfare. In total, Alfred had 5 siblings, 4 sisters, Rebecca, Eliza, Sarah, and Julia, and a brother named Henry. Like many families in small Northeast communities during the Victorian era, the Neafie clan were a tight-knit family, deeply devoted to each other and their unwavering faith in God. This early exposure to religious beliefs was instrumental in instilling in young Alfred a deep-rooted faith and conviction in the power of prayer that remained with him the rest of his life. The Neafies were well known locally for their immense hospitality and frequently had a house full of welcome guests. Alfred's mother, Rhoda, was a well-natured, gentle, nurturing woman, and his father, Cornelius, was a generous, kind-hearted man who was known for both his humor and invincible determination and often indulged in his beloved children. He was a descendant of the old Knickerbocker families who originally settled in New York during the 1630s. A staunch member of the Whig Party, Cornelius had an undying love for his country and hope for its bright future. He was extensively involved with politics, and although he did not live to see it, he often prophesied about an impending civil war. Cornelius ran a large general store and was also Justice of the Peace and School Commissioner in Orange County. Finding greater opportunity elsewhere, Alfred's father relocated the family to Ellenville and built the first cotton mill in Orange County and the second in New York State. He clearly had terrific foresight, as the region soon had many wool mills dotting its riverbanks, and as the Industrial Revolution picked up steam, multiple wool manufacturers followed Cornelius's lead and flocked to the area as well. Like many young boys during the 1840s, Alfred's childhood was spent in a rowdy outdoor subculture where he relished in the joys of the great outdoors. A quiet, introspective, deeply curious child, Alfred was constantly on the pursuit of adventure and enjoyed nothing more than partaking in countless hours of fishing and hunting. After the age of 10, boys need little attention from their mothers, but were not quite old enough to assist with their father's work. Being left to his own devices, Alfred learned an assertive style of independence that immensely molded his character and shaped his future. In 1848, on the other side of the country, gold was found in Coloma, California, creating a flurry of excitement and ushering in what would become known as the California Gold Rush. The news of gold brought approximately 300,000 people to flock in droves to the West Coast in hopes of striking it rich. At the age of 19, his adventurous side got the best of him, and in 1851, Alfred autonomously pursued the promising, newly discovered gold fields of California. In New York, he boarded the sailing vessel, the Gratian, for a 6-month voyage around South America's Cape Horn, en route to promising sun-drenched fields of San Francisco. Neafie spent a total of 2 years prospecting for gold, and while he never successfully unearthed anything of noteworthy value, he did, however, become a member of the celebrated Committee of Vigilance, a group of well-organized vigilantes that formed out of necessity for extra-legal intervention following the explosive rise in criminality due to the abrupt population growth that the gold rush inspired. Neafie joined the 700 members of the Vigilance Committee and assisted in apprehending the famous outlaw Yankee Sullivan, fellow gold prospector turned violent outlaw Three-Fingered Jack McDowell, and was also present at the trial and hanging of notorious California bandit Jaquan Marietta, nicknamed the Robin Hood of the West. Alfred was a dignified, reserved man who gave friendship to all, but intimacy to only a select few. One never really knew what thoughts passed behind the calm repose of his often expressionless face. He was a man of few words, causing many to consider him shy, occasionally even bordering on aloof. However, when Alfred did speak, he was extremely articulate and always said what he meant and meant what he said. On November 11, 1854, Alfred's beloved father passed away, forcing Alfred to leave California and his gold mining ambitions behind, returning to Ellenville, New York. While home, Alfred took a position at a small mercantile business, and 4 years later, in 1858, he met and later married the love of his life, Anne Preston, the daughter of a well-known and prosperous Ellenville glass manufacturer. A year later, the happy couple welcomed their first child, a daughter named Alice, who instantly stole her father's heart and affection. The couple had a total of 5 children, but sadly only 2 lived to see adulthood. Just as Alfred's father had prophesied years earlier, tensions between the North and South came to a resounding head, and following the election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860, the country soon found itself entangled in a civil war. Like many other brave young men of the time, the profoundly patriotic and dutiful Neafie immediately cast aside his personal interests and advanced to the front, enlisting on August 19, 1862 in Kingston, New York. He assisted in raising nearly 2 companies of volunteers and turned down the offer to be captain of Walden, New York's 124th Regiment, instead mustering in as captain of the 156th New York Volunteer Infantry, affectionately referred to as the Mountain Legion. The newly formed regiment trained at Camp Sampson near Kingston before departing New York in December of 1862, headed for New Orleans. Alfred's drive and determination assisted him in successfully achieving rapid promotion, and he regularly found himself in command of the regiment and also at times the entire brigade. Leading came extraordinarily natural to him, and his regiment, although made up of local volunteers, was so well drilled and organized, they were often mistaken as highly trained soldiers of the United States Army. The 156, along with Neafie's impeccable leadership and unflinching devotion to duty, went on to fight in several campaigns and battles, including Fort Bisland, Port Hudson, Winchester, Fisher's Hill, and Cedar Creek. While he participated and offered leadership in many of these battles, a true testament to his character was gallantly on display during the Battle of Cedar Creek. When surrounded on 3 sides by enemy forces and sensing a need to rally the troops, Neafie bravely stood firm and declared, "Men, for God's sake, for honor's sake, for your country's sake, don't flinch now." Inspired by his battle cry, the men did not recoil, but valiantly held their ground. During his illustrious Civil War career, Neafie was Provost Marshal of Alexandria, Louisiana, Supervisor of Trade, Collector of Military Taxes, and Relief Commissioner in Savannah, Georgia, and Chief of General Grover's staff, assisting in the repatriation of the South. As General Grover's Chief of Staff, Neafie was present at the 1865 receipt and booking of disgraced Confederate President Jefferson Davis. He also sat in on a trial of a man who was offered $1 million to anyone willing to assassinate President Lincoln. And in April of 1865, he witnessed the riveting moment the American flag was re-raised over Fort Sumter, signifying the rebirth of our country after the long, devastating, hard-fought conflict. After mustering out of service in October of 1865, Neafie was asked by General Sheridan to stay on with a promise of advancement in the regular army. But he graciously declined, performing instead to return home to New York and his beloved family in Ellenville. Alfred worked at a glass factory his father-in-law operated, and in the 1870s he joined a group of investors in reorganizing the Ulster Knife Company. In 1879, he relocated to Goshen, New York, and ran his own real estate and insurance company. He always held a deep-rooted, undying affection for his beloved comrades in arms, staying in close contact with many of his fellow soldiers long after the war had ended, and even attended several reunions of the brave men from the 156th Mountain Legion. On September 19, 1908, Alfred Neafie, along with 3,000 other individuals, attended the dedication ceremony of the only monument commemorating the 156th New York Volunteer Regiment, erected in memory of the brave and patriotic men who served their country faithfully. I am here in Highland, New York, standing precisely where those heroic men stood on that very day, almost 125 years ago, paying tribute to both Alfred Neafie and all of the men of the 156th Regiment. Alfred Neafie took his last breath on April 16, 1917 in Goshen, New York.